name is Hannah. Welcome back to my channel. I am going to talk about some of the books that I read the past week or so, and there are some that I'm pretty excited about, some I'm not quite sure about, so let's just jump into that. So I had a strange week or so of reading because I do feel like some of my complaints with the books that I've read were my problem. Maybe not necessarily the book's problem. So I read One Day in the Life of Ivan Denisovich, and this is a recommendation from Ann over at Ann with a Book, and this is an interesting one. I mean, it's following basically a day in the life of a Soviet prison camp and just how the main character is trying to find hope in the face of this like communist oppression. And I mean, I could see some good things about it, but also I feel like my attention span is shot and I found it to be a little bit boring. So it was interesting, but I don't have a lot to say about it just because I had a hard time really focusing on this book for some reason. So I'm not sure how much of that is the fault of the book and how much of that is just me having a short attention span right now, but I didn't really love it. It was kind of a meh for me on this one. The next book that I read was on the recommendation of Brandon at Brandon's Bookshelf, so I will link his channel down below. And this was How to Make an Apple Pie from Scratch in Search of the Recipe for Our Universe by Harry Cliff. And this was really interesting. So this is it's a science book, and it is based on the thing that Carl Sagan once said: if you wish to make an apple pie from scratch, you must first invent the universe. So it's going through and trying to break down the essential components of an apple pie, or of anything really, going through astronomy and physics and chemistry, just to find those essential components that make up our universe. And it's super interesting. It has a lot of interesting things. This is one where my short attention span this past week might contribute to me not loving it, because I feel like it needed maybe a more detailed reading than I was willing to give it. I feel like I needed to sit down, really focus, read it slowly to understand and grasp a lot of the concepts. Even though I wasn't able to give it quite the attention that it deserved, my just, read right through approach still was very interesting. I feel like I am lucky in that I have taken some chemistry classes, so a lot of it was very familiar in that I could understand some of what they were talking about. I'm like, oh yeah, I remember talking about this in college and in high school. And also I read some books that have some similar themes. So when I got to about 3/4 of the way through, I thought, maybe I should just stop. I don't know if I'm quite grasping enough of this book. But then it came together really well, and I'm glad I pushed through because I kind of was able to catch back up a little bit because I'd read some other books on string theory and multiverse and all sorts of different theories. I was able to kind of jump back in and understand what was going on a little better because I was with it, kind of was losing it, and then back in it. Super interesting if you want to know more about particle physics, but it does require maybe a little more attention than I have right now. It was good though. Like, I do recommend it. I think these subjects are super difficult. I mean, particle physics isn't something that everybody is going to understand, but I feel like if you really worked at this book, you could kind of get a grasp of some of those general ideas, and it was good. Yeah, I do recommend it if you want this kind of book. This next book is another recommendation from Brandon over at Brandon's Bookshelf. It is called We Die Alone, a World War II epic of escape and endurance by David Haworth. This is following a man who is traveling to Norway as part of a team during World War II, and he gets betrayed and has to try to make his way to freedom in Sweden, and he has no supplies, no nothing. And I really feel like this book did have a lot of human kindness. You can see the people that helped him out of the goodness of their hearts and at great personal risk to get to freedom, and just his amazing endurance and perseverance because he was, he could and should have frozen to death at multiple points during this book. I feel like it really read kind of like into thin air, one of those survival-y kind of books. It is a true story, but it's very much a survival story, and so it's got a lot of those elements of excitement, not necessarily a people drama or anything. It's just a very exciting story about resistance to oppression and perseverance through horrific situations, and just the incredible strength that people can show and bravery. And so, if you want that kind of World War II narrative, there it is. I also did appreciate, I have read a couple World War II books lately that have been about narratives that I don't feel like are typically focused upon, and so I didn't know very much about Norway during World War II, so that gives me a little bit of background there, so I did appreciate that. Do recommend it, super interesting. The Dutch House by Ann Patchett, and I think this was first recommended to me by AJ over at AJ Dunn Reads and Writes, but since then I have also heard many recommendations to back that up, so I was very excited to pick up this book. This story follows a boy with his father and sister and mother who move into this beautiful estate in Philadelphia, and his mother leaves them and his father remarries, and this house is so unique and special and important in their lives. This book gives me a lot of fairy tale, evil stepmother coming in vibes. It's very Cinderella-y that way, and we also just get following over the course. It's a fairy tale, but instead of saying, you know, like, and they lived happily ever after, we also kind of see how the things play out throughout the rest of our main character, Danny, and his sister's lives. And so it's very character driven and kind of interesting, not super plot heavy, you know, like it's very much just following a normal life. I feel like this reminded me a lot of Ann Patchett's other book, Commonwealth, because I feel like she does a good job at putting some interesting, inciting stuff toward the beginning, and the rest is just, let's see what happens to these people through their lives because they had this happen at the beginning of the book. It's not super plot all the way around, which leads me to, with Ann Patchett, I think I might have enjoyed Bel Canto just a little bit more because there was such a strong sense of urgency throughout the plot because it was a hostage situation. So I felt like it was really, you know, bookmarked on either end by excitement, and there were things, yes, it had that signature Ann Patchett, let's delve into these characters' lives and flaws, but also it had kind of a sense of urgency that I didn't necessarily get from this book or from Commonwealth. That being said, I think it's excellent. I think it had a lot of great themes that could be discussed on forgiveness and redemption and service and family relationships. Like, there's so many different things that I feel like could be brought up. It'd be a great book club book. So my adventure into Ann Patchett, I read 4 books by her. I read her little collection of essays that was more based on her life, and then I read the 3 novels, and Bel Canto is probably my favorite, but I found myself enjoying The Dutch House probably the most just because I've gotten used to kind of her voice and how she approaches a story, and it really made me appreciate this book for what it was. So I do appreciate sticking with it all the way through because I feel like there is a lot of meaning in kind of that everyday kind of story, even if I'm not feeling super compelled to finish and I have to know what happens next. It's, you know, a little slower moving. She's a very engaging writer. I don't feel like some of those books, when the plot is a little, you know, not as exciting, I lose a little interest, and I feel like she manages to keep my interest enough, even if it's not super urgent. That's kind of my overall review of Ann Patchett. I think she does a really great job at characters and looking at their motivations and looking at how they can grow and change over time. But I do kind of wish that some of the books had a little bit more attention to plot, because I did enjoy Bel Canto a little more just for that focus on action and excitement that kind of pulled the whole story along. And those are my thoughts on some of the books that I have read in the past little bit. I don't know if any of them made sense. There's some construction going on across the street today, and I don't feel like I can even hear myself think. I keep having to stop the camera every couple minutes because for some reason they're like cutting through a garage door. I don't know. It's loud. So I hope this all made sense. Thanks for coming along with me. If you have any thoughts on these books, put them down in the comments down below, and I will see you all on the next one.